Hello and welcome to Gunnar Weiskamp's Web Development. Today we're looking at Lesson 6 in Web API and cross-domain calls. So today we'll be looking into calling a Web API with cross-domain calls in a bit more detail. We will again be using Angular to call the Web API. This lesson builds a little bit upon Lesson 5, the previous one of this. The app will have 4 projects: main Web API, Client A, Client B, and Client C. The main Web API will be the Web API. Client A will call the main Web API and it will have only GetPermissions. Client B will call the main Web API and it will only have post permissions. Client C will call the main Web API and it will have no permissions, and we will see it does not work. We will also demonstrate how you can configure your Web API to accept cross-domain calls via the use of the global ASAX file. So just briefly again, this cross-domain call with Web APIs. So if you're using a JavaScript language like we're going to be doing today here using Angular, and you're calling from a client application, a project, into a separate project Web API, you have to allow that, you have to give permission in that Web API for that Angular application to use it. So this is the basics of what today is about. But again, this is a build upon the last lesson, so I think if you haven't done the last lesson, you might want to do that. This is taking things into a little bit more detail. Okay, so if you want to create today's app, just go here in file, new project, then web here in B, select those options, then make an empty project, make sure nothing's ticked in here, nice clean empty project. So I'll let that stick there for a bit. I am using 2013, but yeah, you don't really have to use 2013. Right, okay, so without further ado, let us have a look where we're at. We are... oh yeah, sorry, and try to call your first project Client A. Should have mentioned that beforehand, I know. So call the first project Client A. So here we have clean project, nothing else added. I'm going to do all this in a sort of standardized manufactured fashion. Oops, clicked on something. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add in the other projects. Add new project, and we're going to call this Client B. Again, completely empty, don't tick anything here. There we go, Client B. Let's close these down for now. Okay, now add another new project. Call this one Client C. Again, completely empty, didn't make sure nothing's selected. I'm trying to keep the naming conventions easy to follow. So A and B will have permissions to get into the Web API, while C will not. Okay, so can we close it down? Now, one by one, we're going to do all our work on these clients first, and in each client we've got to add Angular. So right click on that, and go to manage new Git packages, search for Angular, oops, whoa, what happened there? Something weird. Right, this time it comes up. The wonderful things of live performances. So install Angular. I think you might actually be able to do this at the solution level for all of your clients, and which means you've only got to do it once. I'm not too sure, but I think you might have been able to do that because I'm going to be doing it one by one, which is a little bit time consuming. To those new to Angular, I do have Angular tutorials in my YouTube channel, so if you want to have a look at those, feel free to have a look at those. So yeah, you can see all the Angular folders being added here. Right, so now close and repeat. So all the actions we're going to do here for our clients, they're going to be pretty standardized, mostly 99% the same. We're just demonstrating, the different actions that each can do and the negative actions that happen with some of them. So we're just trying to keep the code and the structure of each client project here much the same. This is obviously just for demonstrating. Okay, so we can close that. And now, same for this guy. And there we go. There goes all the code. Right, close. Now I'm going to, at this stage, so we've all got Angular here, I'm gonna first add the web API project. So add new project. And I said I'd call this main web API. Sorry, I'm just looking at something. So the right folder, yeah, that's the right folder. So main web API, okay, click OK on that. And in this case, we do not want it empty, we want it to be a web API. I always find these areas quite tricky because if you select on this, you'll get this MVC and the main web API. We don't want MVC, so make sure empty is selected and then select on web API because we just want the web API processes in this project. Okay, so click OK. Right, so before we start hacking around and adding code, I'm going to do a little bit more magic. To make this process run, we have to have all these projects running at the same time. We have to have the web API project also running for these client applications here to be able to call it. I'll show you how you can have all 4 projects here running at the same time in a second. When this is over, we'll configure that. There's our main web API. So here we go. So now when this is going to run, we have to make sure all of these projects are running at the same time. And to do that, well, not running at the same time, but running, just make sure they're all live. So what we do up here, we go in our startup project area, and we set multiple startup projects. And as I said, mentioned, they all need to be running at the same time, or together. They have to be alive. So all the clients will be brought up at the same time. Mainly this needs to run, so these can call into it. So make sure that's all there, press apply, and OK. Okay, so now we've got a good ways there. What is important is we've got to, in the next part of the code we're going to add, we have to understand whether this domain is sitting or this location is sitting. And that's, I believe, here in the web area. So what I mean by domain, I mean this in a sense. Whenever you put anything to live, your domain is going to replace this area here. So this is the domain or the area of the API. Now these client applications are all going to get some Angular code, and in that Angular code it needs to know where to point to. So we've got to write here in our Angular code to point to this domain, and so it's going to need this piece of information within that code. So let's just keep that open for now. So let's first add some Angular code or a JavaScript file to client A. Good place to start. So add JavaScript file. I always like to call this my app file. And while that's going through the motions, let's grab the code from here. Okie dokie, here we have our JavaScript file ready to go. Let's paste the code in. And so this should now be, yeah, here it is. It's now a script file here, as you can see. So let's close it down to make things easier. Now, remember I told you about this Angular file needing to know where to go to that API area. And that's what I meant by here in this area. So this number needs to become this number, more or less. Yeah, we'll discuss the code in a little bit more detail once we get it all together. Next, we're going to do this literally the same for all. To make it simpler for people, you can just literally copy and paste the same file in there. Whoa, that's a lot of code, isn't it? Let's close that down. And then, whoa, so what happened? So, yeah, we've now got this My App also here in our client B. Let's bring him out. So he's going to have a slightly different function, and he's going to do a post action, but again we will talk about code later. I don't want to confuse people too much. Right, now again here we're going to add this my app. It's still in my clip folder. We're going to just add in here. So this my app file will just go in here in the scripts folder as well. There we go. So you can see now client C also has the my app file. We're just going to leave him alone, but sorry, we will talk about, I did say we would talk about code in one hit. So now we've got all our JavaScript files in. We now need to add a HTML file, which indirectly calls the Angular file. So let's add HTML. So client A. Let's keep the naming convention correct and easy to understand. While that's doing that, let's just grab the code. Right, here's our HTML. There we go. Right, and now you can simply copy and paste that in there, but just rename it RB for client B. And now just do, you're probably going to guess me, do the same for client C, but call this client C. So I'm going to explain one client area. There's not really a lot of difference between them all. So by having the same code in each, more or less, we don't have to go for all this different code and try to understand it. So now, if I'm correct, we've got all our client code in here. We've got our HTML, we've got our Angular JavaScript files. We now have to, let's just close these down for now. We now have to do some configure our web API, obviously. So let's do that. I just need to make sure I'm going to name this certain files here in my web API correctly, and to do that I'm going to, I want to keep all the name conventions correct, and that's username control, right? Okay. So let's add a controller in here, and important, don't add a normal MVC controller, but a web API controller. And as mentioned, username. It's important that we get that naming convention correct. While that's doing that, username. Let's put all our code in there. I guess it's a good place to start as well. Those new to web API, you can see the breakdown of these files is quite similar to MVC. You've got your models and controllers here, just no view folders. So here is our controller, and again I'll go through code at a later stage. We now need to add a models folder, and that's going to be called user data model, as we can see there. Let's just do that. user data and model. Try to always, if you're making a model, use a convention of calling it a model at the end. Okay, so we've got that in there. While that's going along, let's grab the code for this guy, which is showing it a slight amount of code. There we go, and now we're going to configure this cross-domain process by putting supercode in our global ASX file, like I mentioned. So let's grab the code for that. Here we go. Okay, okay, I'm just thinking we should just about be ready to go, and then we can talk about the code. We have to bring in the model folder here. This will bring in the user data models and classes. So yeah, we can now, everything is hunky-dory really. How's the best way to explain all this wonderful code? Why don't we start at the top with our clients. Here in client A, the JavaScript file. So, if you're new to JavaScript, you might find this a little bit confusing. I'm going to close all these down. Devil's in the detail. And I'll try to explain it as best as I can without confusing people. And I like to do this by creating this sort of split screen effect. Because here we've got client A HTML, which is this guy, and we've got the JavaScript in this environment as well, which is this guy, or the Angular file to be specific. So let's start at the Angular level. I won't go into too much detail. If you're new to Angular, please visit my tutorials, but the main thing is here we've got this GetUserPassword function, which is also called here. It's going to be given a username. This username is going to be passed into the Web API process, and in the Web API is a function called GetUserPassword, which will return the password for that username that's passed in, if that makes sense. So we're doing a get process here, important. So this client A only has GetPermissions in the Web API, which I'll show you when we look at our main Web API code. So just briefly, this string here is quite important. As I mentioned, you've got to say this part of the string is where your Web API is located, and you find that out by doing the right click on there, and you put that in there. Then you've got to put your oh, I forgot something, didn't I? I think I did. Yes, I did. Whoops, see, it's easy. Devil's in the detail. Just excuse me for a moment. Oh no. Works anyway. Okay. Sorry, I just thought there might be something missing here. Nope, not missing. Works. Okay, so sorry. Sometimes you need to put this API folder into a solution. So if you are having problems and this isn't working for you, in the Web API, create a API folder, and then it's just, yeah, and then create a controller in that API folder. We've put that here in the controllers, and the routing of the main Web API is still finding the controller in here. So long story, short story, This process here calls this controller here, which has a GetUserPassword function in it. Let's have a look at that. So here's this GetUserPassword, and you can see it's a get process as well, as we talked about. This guy here has that get permissions and can do it. Once the username's the password's returned, that happens here in this wonderful magic here of Angular. It's kept in our variable here and returned here in our screen in this area here using Angular expressions. Okay, so a little bit of confusion there, sorry folks, but yeah, so this is our web API area. The function there calls this function here. Again, it's got get permissions, and all we're doing in here is we've got a list object which is holding all our users. Obviously you'd normally do some sort of database action, but if we pass Mary as a username, we're going to get my password Mary back. If we pass Tom as a username, we'll get my password Tom back. And here we're just creating a user data model which is going to hold the result. And let's clean that up a bit. Here we're just doing some link to actually get the username that's passed in out of our user data object here into result. And then we just simply return that JSON result. We're going to talk about this process here in a second. So that's client A. It has get permissions. Sorry, while I'm here, this is where we're doing this get permission. So let's just focus a little bit here. Client A, get permissions. Now it has get permissions because in here we've only given it get permissions. So client A, let's bring up the properties for that. So that should be 60239. So in this case, we've missed out on that. So this is what I mean. So you have to give access for this guy to get into the web API area. And here at client A, its port number or its domain is this number here. For client B, let's have a quick look. Do the same thing while we're here quickly. Is 4950. So client B, right, so there we go. So here in our main web API, we're saying to client A, via this process here, if it comes in here and the context is this guy here, we're going to give you this get permissions. So you can then call the function that we want here, which is this one, because it's got get permissions. So that's client A explained. Right, okay. Hope I'm not confusing people too much out there. It's so easy to do with these sort of demos because there's a lot of moving parts. Now client B is very similar. Whoops, didn't want to do that. Client B is very similar to client C. The HTML is, anyway, HTML is exactly the same. So I'm not going to delve too much into that. The Angular of client B is different. What's the only difference is here? It's going to do this get user password post. It's got post permissions. Let me just make sure that's correct. So, and also these have to be the same. They're still going to the same API. Remember, all these Angular files are going to the same API, so you can see those are the same. But the difference is here, it's going to get this user password post function. Both the internals of those functions are the same. One's just being demonstrated with post, the other's just demonstrated with a get request. And as you can see here, the method here is the post. So now, if we look in our global ASX, sorry, let's start here. So this is again our functionality, our function that we're going to use here for client B, and as you can see, it's going to use this GetUserPassword post, which is this function here. And as you can see, this is just got post permissions. Exactly the same code as above. Obviously, in a real example, you do some sort of post update to a database, but again, this is just for demonstration purposes. So this guy here can only use this action here. If we were to change this to equal that, it can't use that. Why? Because in here, client B, so this is the client B here, it down here, as we can see, has only got post permissions, if that makes sense. So that's the difference between client B and client A. Slight differences, but important. So that just leaves client C to talk about. The HTML is exactly the same. And for all purposes, the Angular file here is exactly the same as the client A. But the key difference here between client C is, if we go to the properties, web, you can see its domain, or in this case its port number, is not referenced over here in our main web API area. It doesn't have permissions. So when this client C tries to call into this web API area here, we're going to get a big fat error. And I thought I'd demonstrate the negatives and the positives of this process. So we sort of have already touched on the web API code. As mentioned here, we've got a model. This model is just to hold username and password, and the controller in here does most of our demonstrational work here. We sort of talked about that, so I won't go and rehash that. And our global ASX file, which I have talked about somewhat in depth as well. So that's, in a nutshell, the whole makeup of our applications. Let's bring this a little bit down. So this guy here has get permissions. He can do a get call into our web API area over here. This guy here has post permissions, so he can call over here in our web API via post. This guy here has no permissions, big error. And obviously this is our main web API. With all that, we can save it all, we can build it. What I like to do sometimes is, so we've already got our screen up there, possibly, don't know if this is really going to help a lot. Let's make this a little bit smaller. So as you can see, all the applications, like I said, are running at the same time. You need to have all the web pages running at the same time, plus the web API for this to work. And that's what we configured at the start of this tutorial. So client A, as we know, this guy should be able to do a GET request. So if we put Mary in here, we should be entering this code here, and my password Mary will be returned. I probably should have put unique values in there. Anyway, let's just click submit. Oh, I'm going to just refresh it quickly. Right, okay, let's try this again. Come on, computer. Something's gone a little bit wrong. I've noticed sometimes with these web API calls, things can go a little bit slow. Okay, we do have a slight error here. That's all looking healthy. Oh, there we go. See, so it's just slow. I hate that. See, we've got this my password Mary finally came up. Wow, that took a while, didn't it? So, okay, we can see client A got access to this web API and got the password back. So B, let's do a different one. I'll test positives rather than negatives first, and we're going to put Tom in, so we should get there we go, it's a bit quicker now. And we got my password Tom back, but this time it went into this post area. So we can see A and B are working fine. This over here is actually our web API running, and it needs to be running. Now if we go into C, we're going to get some bad news. So again, let's put Mary in. We know that works for A. Now if we click submit, we get nothing. And the bad thing with Angular in these sort of areas, you'll sit there and you get, it won't crash, it won't do anything. You'll sit there and you'll go, what's happening? And you start crying. So you really have to, if you know about JavaScript, you have to look behind the scenes what's happening here. So you've got to right click on this file, inspect, come on computer, I will clear the errors in here so we can actually, and then I'll resubmit so we can actually see the actions happening. But we're not getting stuff back here. It's not slow. We're definitely got an error here, and we can see that there. Let's go in here. Okay, so that's the error I'm looking for. But let's just clearly demonstrate this better. So we click submit again, and there we go. We got an error. And this is this no access control allow origin that we get because we have, and it even says here, I think. Header is not present in the web API and therefore is not allowed access. You can't do accepts, gets, post, or any of those sort of processes against it. So that's the error you get if you have not allowed your Angular application access to the web API in a nutshell. Okay, so that is a lot of information. Obviously, to allow C into the mix here, all you'd have to do is, as a test, you can, as a test to allow C in there, all you'd have to do is add it in, make another copy, and put it in there, and then you'd be able to use it. Okay, so I hope that tutorial was helpful. Yeah, feel free to subscribe to my channel or visit my website there as well. Thanks for your time and hope you have a nice evening. Bye.